In 2007, I was a state representative, and I had no idea the things I would discover about why America was collapsing from within would motivate me to take my life savings and make a film. And I had never made a film before. During the 2 years it took to finish the project, my children prayed daily that it would win the largest single cash prize film festival in America, which in my thinking was a mighty tall order. But of course, it wasn't for God.
The 2010 $101,000 grand prize for Best of Festival goes to Agenda!
God is so good. I'd like to thank him for just the wonderful wife he gave me. I don't think any man can even reach a fraction of his potential if he doesn't have the woman with him that God intended him to have for life. And I want to thank her. Kids, I'm giving this to you so you'll always remember God does answer prayers. Thank you so much.
After the festival, Agenda began to spread throughout the country. Millions of people were watching it. We had an average of 1,000 different independent showings every single week for 2.5 years. And as we traveled, people all over just seemed overwhelmed. The people I spoke to felt they were under attack from 100 different enemies with 100 different agendas. But I knew from my research that wasn't the case. If things are always moving in one direction in a unified fashion, there is a reason why. Consistency has never been a virtue of ignorance. An experience we had along the way finally put into place a missing piece of the puzzle. We had a Tea Party group that met monthly at a local community college in Minnesota. We showed the film Agenda, and then afterward, as I was answering questions, a man stood up. He said, "I want to congratulate you on your research and how you found all the socialist, communist influences that have changed America. My hat's off to you." I said, "Thank you, sir." But then he stopped, and I could tell something was coming. He said, "I want to tell you something. I'm a professor at this college. I am a communist, and we will win because we're taking all your children." And then he walked out. A woman in the front row who was crying said, "How could he be at our little community college?" I said, "Ma'am, he is at every school in America. Even though many are starting to wake up, they're studying the issues, they're reading books, they care about this country. They didn't know the most fundamental thing you have to know to ever win a battle of subversion. Your enemy." One of the radical Marxist leaders of the 1960s, I think, gave us the key that we are facing today. He said, "The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution." These masters of deceit have used their propaganda so successfully, they've actually accomplished the greatest feat in warfare. They have convinced us they no longer exist, which has given them carte blanche to subvert, manipulate, deceive, infiltrate, and undermine us with no resistance whatsoever. I realized we didn't understand our enemy at all. Their strategy or tactics, their strengths or weaknesses. My work wasn't finished. There was still so much that people didn't understand about the things they have done and are doing to use the issues against us as tools to destroy. 2,500 years ago, in his masterpiece, The Art of War, Sun Tzu wrote, "If you know yourself, you will win the battle 50% of the time. If you know your enemy, you will win 50% of the time. But if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will win 100% of the time."
If you don't know who we are as a nation, you don't know our identity, you don't know our history, you don't really understand the price that's been paid for America, then anybody can lead you astray.
Once we understand who we are, it will be easy to identify our enemies by those that are attacking the foundations we stand upon. So before the last 100 years of subversion, who were we? What made America the greatest country of all time? God established 3 institutions: the family, the church, and the state. And He told us exactly what their authority was to be and what was within their jurisdictions. America's greatness was that we followed God's instruction on how those institutions should be run. All 3 were created by God to protect each individual person from being abused by the collective. Every attack against us today is aimed at destroying those distinctions. It's interesting to note the Communist Manifesto states the communist goal is to destroy the family, the church, and the state, all 3 of God's institutions. So regardless of how well-intentioned, the enemies of America are all the people and groups that seek to transfer the authority God gave the family and church to the state. And they are collectivists.
Collectivism is a broad ideology that includes all of these things like communism, fascism, Nazism, socialism, left-wingism, liberalism. All of these different words are used to describe different flavors of collectivism. And collectivism is the concept that the state is all-important and that the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number.
Unfortunately, the end of all collectivist schemes is a government that takes care of its citizens from the cradle to the grave, and that is Marxism. The people that don't understand this naively believe you can have big government without totalitarian methods, and history has shown us you cannot.
From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. That was the grand ideal, right? But the problem has always been no one steps down. Once you have the power, no one steps down. And the reality is that beautiful picture was just a picture. It was a fiction. No one ever intended on stepping down.
Therefore, that's the reason, no matter what government you go to, whether it's the national government in Washington, D.C., or you go down to your city hall some Thursday night and take a look of who are those people sitting up there in those big chairs, you know, while the little people come in and say, well, I'd like to complain about this. And they say, your time is up, you know. Who are those people in the city hall? They're collectivists, every one of them. They're enjoying this power. They've been drawn to that power. They're predators.
Big government will never work because no one is capable of being in charge. We like to think of Hitler and Stalin as if they were uniquely evil people. But the simple truth is, every single person on the planet would have done the exact same things they did if they believed their philosophies and weren't accountable to any higher authority. Ideas have consequences. What you believe affects what you will do. They weren't uniquely evil. They were sinful men like the rest of us, but they had exceptionally bad ideas, the same ones we are playing with today.
America was based on the opposite concept of individualism, was that the purpose of the state was not to govern the individual, but to protect the individual. The individual was supreme, and the state was the servant of the individual.
In America, valuing each person, this is biblical. This comes from Christianity. You go to communist countries or Islamic countries, life is not valuable. You know, you kill, so what?
You can put it in whatever package you want, but the facts are, the mantra of our age being accepted worldwide is, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And that is communism.
It's not the case that the Cold War is over, or to put it another way, it's not the case that the West has won the Cold War. The Cold War was not a military confrontation between two military alliances. It was a war of ideologies. It was a war of utopian totalitarian socialism versus democracy, market economy, freedom.
I interviewed a New Zealander some years ago who infiltrated the New Zealand Communist Party and was sent to the Soviet Union to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning in 1983. This was the school for communists from all over the world, 6,000 students at any one time, some of them on 7-year courses. They were taught there was going to be a massive opening to the West, that the communists did much better in times of détente than they did of conflict. So they were going to open up to the West, they were going to downplay communism, they were going to change their system.
One of the tenets laid down by Lenin was that you have to pretend to be defeated. Communism, as they say, or Leninism is the better word, has gone back and forth through this friendly mode, enemy mode many times throughout history. And this is just to lure the opposition into a feeling of false security.
The way you finish ideological wars, the way you destroy an ideology, and we have historical precedent for that. That happened with the Nazis. We should have had the Cold War over 20 years ago, yes, but for that we would need a Nuremberg-style trial of communism, all the crimes exposed, all the archives opened, the judgment of history passed. That didn't happen.
Now you've got to realize, when Nazi Germany was defeated in World War II, the Americans went in there and denazified the country. Anybody who was a Nazi was taken out of positions of power, totally changed the whole political climate. Russia was never de-KGB'd. The KGB was left in place, and now it is stronger than it ever was before. And you see their puppet, Mr. Putin, attempting to reinstitute the Soviet Empire now.
They may have changed their name, they took their hat which said Communist Commissar across the top, they turned it around, and now it says entrepreneur or capitalist or social democrat or something. But it's the same hat on the same heads of the same Leninists.